Though the readings on this podcast might be Aries Aquarius, the language and themes can be fiery as Leo. On this episode, we're exploring the moon maven of lunar living, Meliea Black's May 2024 Oracle reading from the Soul Trees deck featuring the Release card. Hey y'all, I'm Grace, and this is Mediocre Mystic, the podcast where we explore how mediocre makes the world go round and how mediocre works in mysterious ways. Thanks so much for joining me and Meliea. Please take a moment to subscribe, follow, rate, and review Mediocre Mystic on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or any of the platforms where you find your podcasts.
Coming into May. Ooh, so all that will happen in April, all that new stuff, that's a lot, right? So we want to then, in May, have a time of release. Because anytime we go through change, anytime we branch out, anytime and we've gone through a cycle here. We've gone from clarity to healing and nourishing our roots to adventure and branching out. And now, we're in that place of like, whew, all right, what do I need to let go of? Because as new things come into our lives, we start seeing the things that have been holding us back all along, right? So we want to release, but release is not just letting things go. Sometimes it's letting things out. Sometimes it's no longer keeping them in. So part of what you want to ask yourself under the May 7th new moon is, what do I need to do? What do I need to put out there into the world? In what ways do I need to let myself be seen and heard? Is it time for me to tell my story? Not everybody has to do a podcast, okay? But maybe you start sharing on your social media. Maybe you share part of your heart. Maybe you share the process of change that you've been going through. It's going to be really important for us to connect to each other in that way this year. So this is like your time to create the new album of you, like uncut, right? Wherever you want to do that, whether that's in a blog, it's in social media, whether it's just in photos, like whatever it is, what do you need to put out into the world? And you know what that thing is. You know that thing, because here's what happens when when that knowing comes to you. You kind of get this desire to say something, but then you start overthinking it. You're like, oh, well, what will so-and-so think? And what will these people think? And will I offend these people? And all of that comes in, and then you overthink yourself into holding it all in. And so the May lunar cycle will be the lunar cycle for you to release that you've been holding and putting that out into the world. So your question under the May new moon, what do I need to put out there? How do I let myself be seen and heard?
A quick look at my social media will let you know that I'm an intentional poster. I've never been a daily poster, and I'm doing well if I get something up weekly. I think I struggle with social media because I'm a Gen Xer who had an analog childhood and has a digital adulthood. Alas, it is a big part of how we tell our stories and how we share our lives in this digital age. There are so many Gen X jokes and memes about how we were feral and how we raised ourselves and each other. First, let me say, it's all fucking true. But the reality of growing up Gen X is that we never really had a voice or a seat at the table with adults. We were meant to be seen and not heard, and really not seen either until after 10 o'clock when the commercial asked our parents if they knew where their children were. We're sort of perpetual young adults in our minds and hearts, hence the memes and jokes about how we don't really age. I assure you, whilst I might have a baby face, my back tells a different story. Anyway, that probably seems like it might be nice until you realize the effect is that many of us struggle. I still struggle at 45 fucking years old to take up space in a room, to let my voice carry and be heard. Despite my conflicting desire to fly under the radar, I try to share myself and my truth with the world in an effort to change this deeply wounding effect on my generation. I have a deeper desire to live my truth out loud, knowing that is what will lead to real connection. Sometimes, however, I notice that even as I'm genuinely trying to share my authentic story, I can feel disconnected, almost like I'm recapping an episode of a reality TV show. I often think I've told my story, and who the hell wants to hear it anyway? You know, I have a good old dose of imposter syndrome, even in my own damn story. Sometimes we need to tell our story just to hear ourselves and reconnect with our own soul. And sometimes we need to tell our stories not worrying if it isn't fantastical, but hoping as we share our everyday person's story, someone else hears it and shares that connection. Our stories are the key that help us reach out and find ourselves and each other. My story matters. Your story matters. And our stories together matter and make us who we are. Human. As I think back on the month of May, I was going through a lot of self-reflection, thinking on the questions Meliea asked us. What's holding you back? What do you need to release? For me, I do overthink and worry far too much about how I'll be received, and perhaps judged. I know that at this point, it is a matter of choosing the action to release that concern, so as not to impede the connection I so long for with all of you. And so, the practice is to take my seat at the table, to keep sharing my ongoing story with a steady voice. There are so many ways to tell our stories. I leave you with Melia's question. How do you need to be seen and heard in the world? Now that you've heard from Meliea and me, I want to hear from you. How's the month of May treating you? Call or text me at 980-355-9665. Email me at mediocremysticpod@gmail.com. Visit mediocremystic.com and check out the show notes for links to social media and references from this episode. And don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, and review Mediocre Mystic on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or any of the platforms where you find your podcasts. If you'd like to hear Melia's story, go listen to Season 3, Episode 5 of 2022. Learn how her near-death experience changed everything, from deconstructing her fundamentalist evangelicalism to reconstructing her life, standing firmly in her own truth. Until then, may the phases of the moon wane your pains and wax your joy to the max.